Okay, so I was on the phone with my mom the other day, and she brought up something I'm pretty sure many of us have heard before. She was talking about how I'm inconsistent, how I don't always pick up her calls or maybe reply to texts right away, standard stuff. And then she used that one word, the word everyone reaches for. I know, she said, you're just busy.
The universal excuse. Simple, logical.
Exactly, and perfectly reasonable. Except it was completely untrue. I actually had to explain to her that busy wasn't it at all. Like, no, I wasn't in some important meeting, wasn't drowning in work. The truth is, at that exact moment she might have called, I was probably, I don't know, reading some useless magazine or making a milkshake.
Seriously?
Making a milkshake, love it. Right. And I told her, look, I now have these parts of my day where I consciously put my phone on silent. Sometimes I literally throw it across the room. Let's just unplug. My unresponsiveness, it wasn't an accident. It was totally intentional.
And her reaction?
That's what made me realize something profound was going on. She paused. You could hear her thinking. And then she asked, Are everyone in your generation like this?
Wow. That question really hits home, doesn't it?
It completely stopped me. And that question.
Yeah.
Well, that's what this deep dive is all about today.
It really reframes the whole thing instantly. The fact that choosing not to respond, that intentional unresponsiveness, has become a necessary conscious strategy just to get through a normal day. It tells you the problem isn't just about individual willpower or discipline, right?
Not at all.
It suggests that the environment itself, the digital world we live in, is fundamentally, engineered almost to constantly demand our attention.
Absolutely. So our mission today really is to dig deep into those invisible forces. We're talking about the algorithm, sure, but also our ancient social instincts, those relentless dopamine loops, all the things driving this compulsive digital behavior. We need to unpack why actively choosing to miss out, ignoring that ping, skipping that notification, why that's becoming, frankly, a core survival strategy in this hyper-connected world we've built. Okay, so to really understand how this environment is engineered, let's maybe start somewhere surprising, but incredibly relevant. Gambling.
Ah, yes. The Vegas connection.
Exactly. There's some fascinating research, particularly from Natasha Dow-Schul, looking at gambling machines in Las Vegas. It provides a really powerful analogy for understanding this digital compulsion we're talking about.
It's a spot-on analogy because it perfectly tracks that shift from, say, social interaction, people around a card table, chips clacking, that kind of vibe, to a much more solitary compulsion driven entirely by technology.
Right. It wasn't always just rows of blinking machines.
Right. No, gambling used to be largely communal. But the casino industry, they're smart. They recognize that shifting the focus to electronic terminals, pumping them up with compelling digital interfaces, flashy video, it drastically changed how people played.
And the bottom line followed.
Oh, absolutely. Slot machines, video poker, they quickly overtook the traditional table games as the primary revenue generators. It wasn't even close.
And this technological shift gave rise to a concept, a term that I think just perfectly captures some of our digital experiences, the machine zone. What exactly is that? Sounds kind of hypnotic.
It really is. The machine zone describes this state of rhythmic, continuous play. It's almost trance-like. And crucially, the player in that zone, the primary focus often isn't even winning or losing money anymore.
Really? What's the goal then?
The goal shifts. It becomes simply about keeping playing, extending the session for as long as humanly possible. It's a state of flow, but maybe a darker kind of flow where the outside world just melts away.
What kind of things?
Daily worries, social obligations, the need for sleep, hunger, even physical discomfort. It all fades into the background. The player is actively seeking to lose themselves completely in the seamless mechanical rhythm of the machine. Just keep going.
That hits incredibly close to home. That feeling of just scrolling endlessly through a social feed or watching one short video after another on TikTok or Reels. It's not always pleasurable, is it? Sometimes it's just continuous input. You're seeking the continuation of the loop itself, not necessarily a specific outcome or feeling.
Precisely. You've nailed it. And the casino design. It shows us this state isn't accidental. It's entirely intentional. Schul's work details the whole strategy.
Like what?
Everything. The specific algorithms driving the games, the near misses, the payout schedules, the ergonomics of the chair designed for long sitting, the ambience management of the casino floor itself, the player tracking systems monitoring your every bet, the effortless access to cash or credit.
Wow.
Every single element is meticulously crafted and optimized for one single metric: maximum time on device.
Okay, but how does that ambience management At the low lighting, no clocks, maybe the free drinks, how does that translate to our phones? We're not exactly getting casino comps on Instagram.
Not literally, no, but conceptually.
Yeah.
The strategies are almost identical. Think about it. The casino ambience is designed to make you lose track of time and external reality, right? No windows, no clocks, constant managed sensory input.
Yeah.
Digital platforms create their own ambience. Standardized, often soothing color palettes, infinite scrolling that eliminates natural stopping points, the way apps often hide the phone's own status bar, removing the time or battery level from view within the app.
Ah, I see that now.
The goal is identical. Reduce friction, eliminate exit cues, and encourage uninterrupted solitary engagement. You're being tracked, your behavior analyzed, and the experience optimized to keep you there for the maximum possible session length, just like in the casino.
So when we start talking about the ethics of these platforms, the responsibility, looking back at the gambling debate seems crucial. What's the core tension that analogy really highlights for us?
It highlights this fundamental conflict, this friction, that runs right through modern consumer society. On one hand, we cherish ideals like consumer sovereignty, the free market, the idea that individuals are rational actors making informed choices.
Right, personal responsibility.
Exactly. But what happens when the product itself, whether it's a cleverly designed slot machine or a sophisticated algorithm, is specifically engineered to foster compulsion, to bypass rationality? That notion of pure free choice starts to look, well, a bit shaky.
The lines get blurred.
Completely. The gambling debate constantly bumps up against this.
Yeah.
Where does the responsibility for harmful interaction actually lie? Is it solely with the consumer? Is it the product's design? Is it the lack of regulation? This framework applies directly to our digital devices and social media apps. It forces us to ask, is free choice even fully possible when the environment is designed to hook you?
That's a heavy question. Let's bring this idea of engineered compulsion right into our daily digital lives. We talk about social media addiction, or SMA. Is that like a formal, clinically recognized disorder at this point?
Well, it's still evolving. The scientific community is working on standardizing the terminology, so you'll definitely see a lack of complete consensus. Researchers might use terms like problematic social media, use PMSU or social media disorder, or even platform-specific labels like Facebook addiction.
It's a bit messy.
A little. But despite the different names, the core characteristics, they're remarkably consistent and, yes, clinically recognizable. We're talking about excessive and compulsive use, first and foremost, paired with this uncontrollable urge to log on, to browse, to check. And critically, it leads to demonstrable interference with real-world life. Things like your job performance, your relationships, even basic physical health.
And it's classified alongside gambling, you mentioned, not like nicotine or alcohol addiction. What's the significance of calling it a behavioral addiction?
That distinction is absolutely critical. Behavioral addictions, think gambling disorder, gaming disorder, they don't involve actually ingesting a chemical substance. But, and this is key, they activate the exact same core neural pathways in the brain as substance addictions.
So the brain reacts similarly?
Essentially, yes. And SMA. It still manifests all the classic symptoms of addiction. First, you see increased tolerance. Users find they need more and more time online or more intense interactions just to get the same feeling of satisfaction they used to.
Needing a bigger hit.
Kind of. Second, obvious withdrawal symptoms when they try to cut back or stop. We're talking anxiety, irritability, restlessness, just feeling off. Third, a clear loss of control. They intend to check for 5 minutes, and an hour later, they're still scrolling.
We've all been there.
And fourth, definite functional impairment. It starts negatively impacting their responsibilities, their sleep, their face-to-face interactions.
You also mentioned a key difference in the reinforcement mechanism between, say, a slot machine and a social feed. How does social media make its reward loop potentially even more sustainable than just winning money?
It comes down to the nature of the reward and, crucially, its unpredictability. Social media platforms are masters of intermittent reinforcement. They deliver rewards through instant, interactive feedback. A like, a comment, a share, a tag, even just a novel piece of content appearing as you scroll.
Social currency.
Exactly. Which is immensely valuable to our deeply social primal brains. Unlike a slot machine offering purely monetary wins, the social feed offers this highly personalized, ever-changing stream of social validation, connection, and novelty.
And you never know when the next hit is coming.
That's the engine. The platform continuously stimulates you with an unpredictable reward. You don't know when the next comment will land or if the next swipe up will reveal that perfect video or juicy piece of news. This is what psychologists call a variable ratio reinforcement schedule. And decades of research show it's the single most effective way to condition and lock in continuous compulsive behavior. It's addiction by design.
That unpredictability, that variable ratio schedule. It sounds like the perfect key to hijack the brain's reward system. I want to ground this science a bit, make it feel real. Think about this story. Someone we could call Leo. He was trying to study, right? Classic scenario. But he described this compulsion, this urge to check his phone, not as a desire, not like, ooh, I want to see something fun. He described it as a physical, almost desperate need to stop an itch, an internal restlessness.
Mm-hmm. That physical craving.
Yeah. And he said he'd give in, check the phone, get that maybe 1 second boost of something, maybe relief. But then immediately afterward, he felt worse, more anxious, totally unable to refocus on his studying. He genuinely used the words, he felt like his brain was broken, like his concentration was just shot.
Leo's description is just, it's a perfect encapsulation of what it feels like when your reward pathway is under siege. That intense physical need, the anxiety building up before the check, that tells us the brain's main control system for rewards, the mesolimbic system, has been deeply, deeply engaged and is running heavily on dopamine.
Right, dopamine. We hear that word thrown around constantly, especially with phones and social media. Can you simplify for us how exactly these platforms are exploiting this ancient chemical pathway?
Absolutely. And it's important to clarify, dopamine isn't strictly the pleasure chemical. It's more accurately the seeking or motivation chemical. It drives our anticipation, our desire to go get something.
Ah, okay. The wanting, not the liking.
Largely, yes. Now, social media algorithms, which are constantly learning from our digital footprints, every click, every pause, every like, they become incredibly efficient at stimulating this dopaminergic mesolimbic pathway. Specifically, they target areas deep in the midbrain, like the ventral tegmental area, or VTA, and the nucleus accumbens.
The brain's reward center.
That's the core of it. And by activating this pathway, which is the exact same pathway activated by addictive drugs, by gambling, by anything highly rewarding, the platforms essentially create a shared neural mechanism for addiction, whether it's behavioral or substance-based. They found the brain's repeat button.
And this repeated pressing of the button leads to what you call the unrelenting dopamine cycle. How does that spiral work? How does it keep itself going?
It's a feedback loop built on anticipation and desire. The endless feed, the constant potential for novelty or social validation, generates immense desire. What's next? Did anyone respond? Is there something new?
Was seeking.
Exactly. This desire drives the active seeking behavior, opening the app, scrolling, refreshing, checking notifications. Then, the moment the user anticipates or actually receives a reward, could be a like, a tag, a comment, or just a particularly engaging post, that little surge of dopamine validates the seeking behavior. And what does that do?
Makes you want to seek again.
Immediately. It reinstates the desire for the next hit. The system is brilliantly engineered, not necessarily to make you feel satisfied or happy long term, but to keep you perpetually seeking. It thrives on keeping you slightly unfulfilled, always anticipating the next reward.
That constant seeking, it sounds exhausting, frankly, and profoundly problematic for anyone. But the data you mentioned earlier pointed to a particular vulnerability among adolescents and young adults. Why are they at such higher risk?
It really comes down to brain development. Their brains, particularly the prefrontal cortex, which is crucial for things like impulse control, long-term planning, and weighing consequences. Essentially, our executive functions are still under construction. They're structurally developing well into the early 20s.
So they have less braking power, essentially.
In a way, yes. And the statistics are stark. We know almost a third of all social media users fall into this adolescent and young adult bracket. Specifically, something like 93 to 97% of teenagers aged 13 to 17 are using at least one platform. And within that, girls aged 16 to 24 seem to be the most intensely active users, often clocking over 3 hours a day.
3 hours a day, consistently bombarding a still developing brain with these intense dopamine hits.
Exactly. This consistent hyperactivation of the dopamine system during such a sensitive developmental window significantly increases the risk of developing addictive behaviors later on. It's like training the brain to expect and crave that high level of stimulation.
And what's the long-term fallout? What happens when you train a young brain on these super potent, super fast digital rewards?
One major concern is a phenomenon called reduced reward sensitivity. It's like tolerance builds up, but for pleasure itself. If the brain becomes accustomed, habituated to the intense, instant, hyper-efficient rewards delivered by the digital world,
then normal stuff seems boring.
Precisely. Natural rewards, the quiet satisfaction of reading a physical book, the slow unfolding of a deep conversation, the effort involved in learning a musical instrument or painting, they start to feel dull, muted, less rewarding by comparison. The brain's threshold for what feels good or engaging gets artificially raised, and the real analog world often struggles to compete.
You also mentioned actual structural changes in the brain earlier. That sounds pretty serious. You mentioned dysregulation in areas like the basal ganglia, the amygdala, and that prefrontal cortex, the PFC. Can we break down what those changes mean for how we actually function day to day?
Let's try to simplify it. Think of it like this. Addiction, whether behavioral or substance-based, tends to do two things simultaneously. It enhances the brain's focus on the incentive, the immediate reward, the thing it's craving. It makes that reward seem incredibly salient and important.
Turns up the volume on the reward signal.
Exactly. But at the same time, it weakens the brain's ability to put the brakes on. It degrades those crucial executive controls we talked about, the functions housed primarily in the PFC that govern impulse regulation, rational decision-making, planning ahead, and considering consequences.
So more gas, less brake.
That's a great way to put it. And crucially, neuroimaging studies confirm this isn't just a temporary behavioral shift. We see actual structural changes.
What kind of changes?
Well, for instance, some research links problematic internet use, which often heavily involves social media, to an increase in gray matter volume in areas deeply involved in reward response and habit formation. Specifically, places like the bilateral putamen and the right nucleus accumbens key nodes in that dopamine reward circuit we discussed.
Wait, so the parts of the brain driving the habit are actually getting physically larger or more dense? That sounds counterintuitive.
It does seem strange, but it suggests those pathways are becoming more robust, more ingrained. But here's the kicker. Simultaneously, studies often find a corresponding decrease in gray matter volume in parts of the prefrontal cortex, especially the orbitofrontal cortex.
The brake pedal area.
Exactly. The area essential for evaluating long-term consequences, making complex judgments, and inhibiting inappropriate responses. So you literally have a brain structure that is boosting the drive for the reward while shrinking the control center designed to regulate that drive.
Yeah.
And there's more. Intense smartphone addiction, specifically, has also been linked to reduced neural activity in another critical area, the anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC. The ACC is vital for things like detecting errors, monitoring conflict in our thoughts or actions, and sustaining attention.
So let me get this straight. The brain becomes less able to notice when it's making a mistake or going off track, less able to put on the brakes, while the accelerator pedal for seeking those immediate digital rewards is being pressed harder and harder, even potentially getting bigger.
You've summarized the neurobiological dilemma perfectly. It's essentially a biological formula for compulsion, hardwired by the very tools we use every day.
Okay, so we've got the chemical hijack, the dopamine cycles, even the structural changes in the brain. That's the micro level. Now let's zoom out, scale up to the sort of societal or even species level, because while our brains are being rapidly optimized, maybe even damaged by digital input, our deepest, oldest instincts are still wired for a fundamentally different kind of world, aren't they? This is the evolutionary mismatch idea.
Absolutely. This is such a crucial piece of the puzzle. Humans evolved over millennia as an ultra-social species. Our success hinged on cooperation, on understanding complex social dynamics. But here's the thing. Our capacity for managing those social relationships, our entire social cognitive toolkit, evolved in the context of small-scale, face-to-face tribal societies.
Not global digital networks.
Definitely not. We are now living in a digital world that demands a level of constant social processing, comparison, and interaction that simply far, far exceeds our original biological design limitations. We weren't built for this scale.
And that brings us right back to that famous concept, Dunbar's number. Can you refresh us on that?
Right. Robin Dunbar, an anthropologist and evolutionary psychologist, did groundbreaking research looking partly at primate brain size and social group complexity. He proposed that there's a cognitive limit hardwired into our brain's processing power on the number of people with whom we can maintain stable, meaningful social relationships.
And that number is?
It's consistently estimated to be around 150. Now, there's confidence interval maybe ranging from 100 up to about 230, but 150 is the commonly cited figure. And it's not just an arbitrary number. It represents the cognitive load involved in tracking not just individuals, but the relationships between them. Who knows whom, who's allied with whom, who owes favors, family ties, past interactions, reputations, all the complex stuff that makes up real social fabric.
Okay, so 150 is roughly our brain's bandwidth for meaningful social tracking. What happens then when we suddenly plug into digital networks that contain hundreds, maybe thousands of friends, followers, contacts, connections?
The short answer: the brain gets completely overwhelmed. It's like trying to run incredibly complex modern software on ancient hardware. Let's think about another story, someone we can call Sarah. Imagine Sarah's brain. It's beautifully evolved to keep tabs on the goings-on, the statuses, the ups and downs of maybe 150 people in her village or tribe. Now, suddenly, through her phone, it's forced to process this relentless fire hose of filtered highlight reel status, updates the engagements, the promotions, the exotic vacations, the perfectly curated family photos from thousands of people, all at once, all day long.
That sounds like guaranteed cognitive overload, just too much input.
It is overload, but it also leads to this profound and really damaging social paradox. Instead of fostering a sense of strong community or cohesion, which you might intuitively expect from more connection.
It does the opposite.
Often, yes. This hyper-connected environment forces constant, involuntary social comparison. And because we're usually comparing our own messy, complex, unfiltered reality to the carefully curated composite perfection presented online by hundreds or thousands of others, the result is often brutal.
So Sarah sees all this perfection.
And she feels like she's failing. She feels inadequate. She starts experiencing these profound feelings of isolation, of not measuring up, of maybe even being, well, exiled from the digital tribe, even though paradoxically she's more connected in terms of nodes on a network than any human has ever been before.
Wow. That feeling of being exiled, that constant comparison, the sense that everyone else is living a better life, that must be a huge driver of anxiety, right?
It's a massive driver.
Yeah.
And it fuels that phenomenon we now call FOMO, the fear of missing out. FOMO isn't just about wanting to be included. It becomes this gnawing anxiety, a genuine fear that if you don't constantly check what your friends, your network, your influencers are doing, you'll fall behind, be left out, miss something crucial.
So you check to relieve the anxiety?
Exactly. And research across diverse cultures confirms this strong link. The severity of someone's FOMO directly correlates with more intense, more frequent, and more problematic use across multiple social media platforms. People aren't always checking because they genuinely want to engage or connect. They're often checking compulsively because they fear the emotional cost of being absent.
And what about the actual quality of the engagement when you are checking? Maybe just to scratch that FOMO itch or pass the time. Does that matter?
It matters immensely. The research shows a very clear link between the perceived purpose or meaningfulness of the social media use and the resulting emotional outcome. When users report engaging primarily for what they call habitual time passing, or just mindless scrolling without a specific goal.
Just filling time.
Right. That kind of low-meaning activity consistently shows a negative relationship with mood. It doesn't make people feel better. In fact, it often leaves them feeling like they've achieved less, wasted their time, maybe even feeling vaguely depressed or anxious afterwards. It can actually accelerate the negative cycle.
Yeah.
You feel bad, so you scroll to escape, but the scrolling itself makes you feel worse, prompting more escape scrolling.
It's a trap. And the broader statistics on the resulting mental health trends, they're pretty hard to ignore, aren't they?
They paint a worrying picture. We see a clear trend of increased social anxiety being linked to hyper-engagement online. One study found over 41% of a surveyed population reporting heightened social anxiety connected to their digital habits. More dramatically, multiple studies have consistently found that teenagers spending upwards of 3 hours a day on social media were significantly more likely, around 35% more likely, to experience feelings of social isolation.
Isolation from the tool that promises connection.
That's the devastating irony. The very tool, designed, marketed, and adopted for limitless connection, appears to be driving significant numbers of its users, especially young users, into states of heightened anxiety, pervasive comparison, FOMO, and ultimately profound social isolation. It perfectly illustrates that evolutionary mismatch, our ancient social needs being warped by modern digital scale.
Okay, so we've pulled together the threads, the chemical hijack in the brain, the dopamine issues, and this deep evolutionary mismatch with our tribal social wiring. Now, researchers have started organizing these different psychological drivers into a more comprehensive framework, something called the dual pathway model of social media addiction.
That's right. It's a really useful model because it helps explain how the compulsion develops and maintains itself over time. It basically suggests that social media addiction isn't driven by just one thing, but by two distinct yet dynamically interacting emotional reinforcement mechanisms. Think of them as two engines working together.
And those are positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement.
Exactly. Let's start with the first engine, the one that often gets people hooked initially. Positive reinforcement, PR. This pathway is all about seeking pleasure, chasing the good feelings.
The high.
Sort of. The primary drivers here are those immediate pleasurable experiences you get from the platform, particularly the social rewards, getting likes, positive comments, gaining followers, feeling recognized or validated. Also, the simple novelty of discovering new, interesting, or entertaining content.
And this is where that machine zone idea and the variable ratio reinforcement schedule really kick in, right? Maximizing that thrill of the chase for the next positive hit.
Precisely. This PR mechanism is profoundly dopamine-driven, as we discussed. The platforms are designed to continuously stimulate dopamine release through those unpredictable reward placements. It's like a slot machine for social validation. You never know when you're going to hit a great post, get a flurry of likes, or stumble upon that perfect video. This constant unpredictability maximizes what are called reward prediction errors in the brain, which basically supercharges the seeking behavior and keeps it perpetually reinforced.
The research actually identified some specific psychological motives that really predict this problematic reward-seeking use, didn't it? What were the strongest drivers for how often people check?
Yes, they broke it down. The desire for social reward emerged as the single strongest predictor. That covers both the frequency of checking the apps and the overall level of problematic use. And under that umbrella fall specific behaviors like impression management, carefully crafting your online image. Also, social comparisons, constantly measuring yourself against others. And of course, FOMO, that fear of missing out we talked about.
So wanting to look good, see how you stack up, and not miss out drives checking. What else?
Also significant was the desire for enjoyment reward. This is simpler, using social media for entertainment to pass the time, maybe to lift your mood or just zone out. This also significantly predicts both how often someone checks and how likely their usage is to become problematic.
Okay, that makes sense. But there was also a particularly interesting, maybe darker finding about certain antisocial motives that also seem to fuel prolonged use. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, that was quite a finding. A motivation they labeled negative social potency. This encompasses behaviors that aren't about seeking positive connection at all. We're talking about things like trolling, deliberately provoking arguments, seeking status by being disruptive or even cruel online.
So being intentionally negative.
Right. And surprisingly, this desire for negative social potency was found to be a strong predictor of prolonged time spent on the platforms, and also associated with higher levels of problematic use.
But why would being negative or antisocial be reinforcing? That seems counterintuitive if the goal is usually likes and validation.
It taps into a different kind of reward, perhaps. Think about it. Control, perceived power, maybe just raw attention. In certain online subcultures or niches, provoking strong reactions in others, even negative reactions like anger or outrage, can be interpreted as a form of social recognition or status within that specific group. It shows you can command attention, you can affect people.
Power through disruption.
Exactly. It can also give the user a sense of control over the emotions of others. If you're perhaps feeling powerless, ignored, or miserable in your offline life, being able to trigger a strong emotional response, even if it's frustration or anger in hundreds of strangers online, can be a potent, albeit incredibly destructive, form of reinforcement. It confirms, I exist, I have impact, even if that impact is negative.
That actually makes a disturbing kind of sense. Okay, so if positive reinforcement is about seeking the high, chasing the pleasure, then the second pathway, negative reinforcement, NR, is the flip side. It's about avoiding the low, right? And this often signals a more entrenched addiction.
That's generally the pattern, yes. Negative reinforcement is driven almost purely by emotional avoidance. The user isn't primarily seeking pleasure anymore. They're turning to social media as a form of self-medication. It becomes an escape hatch, a palliative strategy to alleviate immediate negative feelings, stress from work, anxiety about life, daily frustrations, maybe profound loneliness or boredom.
Using it to numb out.
Precisely. The behavior gets reinforced because, in the very short term, scrolling or engaging does provide some immediate emotional relief. It offers a momentary psychological block from whatever difficult reality they're facing.
But surely that reliance on digital escape comes at a cost. It must hinder the development of actual real-world coping skills.
Absolutely. That's the core problem with the NR pathway. The cycle is maintained by the underlying negative emotional state, which, as we discussed, can be worsened by the structural changes in the brain, particularly the degeneration of prefrontal control function. This leads to repeated self-control failures.
So you feel bad, you can't stop yourself, you escape online.
And the online escape provides very temporary relief, but it consistently weakens your ability to develop and practice more adaptive coping strategies in the real world. And it can become a truly vicious cycle. Imagine this. You go online seeking social rewards, PR pathway, but maybe your post gets fewer likes than you expected, or you see others having fun while you feel left out.
So the reward is lower than anticipated.
Right. That experience of feeling neglected, rejected, or inadequate online then triggers negative feelings. Disappointment, anxiety, sadness. This emotional pain activates the negative reinforcement pathway. You feel bad because of the digital interaction, which then pushes you to seek more digital input to escape the pain caused by the last digital interaction.
Wow. The platform causes the pain and offers the cure.
In a way, yes. The addiction subtly shifts its primary driver over time, moving from pursuing rewards, PR, to desperately trying to avoid discomfort, NR. The goal changes from I want to feel happy to the much more desperate, I just need to stop feeling so terrible right now.
Okay, so we have these two distinct pathways fueling the addiction. It follows then that interventions need to be targeted, right? You can't just use one approach. How do we effectively tackle that first pathway, the positive reinforcement reward-seeking pathway?
To effectively target the PR pathway, the focus needs to be on reward competition. You have to challenge and change the underlying value assigned to those digital rewards. A key strategy involves correcting core reward expectation biases.
Like what kind of biases?
The deeply ingrained, often subconscious beliefs like, the number of likes I get determines my self-worth, or I need constant novelty and stimulation to be happy, or being popular online is the most important thing. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is often very effective here. It directly challenges these maladaptive thoughts and helps replace them with more realistic and healthy perspectives.
Okay, challenge the thinking. But practically, how do you compete with those instant, super potent digital rewards? The real world seems so slow in comparison.
That's the challenge. You need to consciously substitute them with real achievements and experiences that offer a different kind of satisfaction, one that's often more effortful but ultimately more lasting and meaningful. This could be anything from learning a new skill, completing a tangible project you care about, engaging in creative expression, or deepening face-to-face relationships.
And physical activity. You mentioned that earlier.
Yes, and it's worth emphasizing. Research specifically recommends moderate, fun, low-intensity aerobic exercise. This isn't just generic exercise is good for your advice. It's a specific intervention because physical activity has been shown to naturally modulate the dopamine pathway in a healthy way. It can actually help antagonize the pull of those artificial, quick-hit virtual rewards by providing a natural, embodied source of satisfaction and stress relief.
What about changing the platforms themselves? Are there structural or ethical design changes that could dampen that addictive variable reinforcement schedule?
This is absolutely critical because individual effort can feel like swimming upstream against a powerful current. Ethical design changes tackle the problem at the source, shifting some responsibility back onto the platforms. One promising intervention that's been trialed is simply removing the public visibility of like counts.
Hiding the likes.
Exactly. Early research suggests this can reduce the motivation to constantly seek external validation and perform for approval, thereby reducing some problematic use behaviors tied to social comparison and impression management. Furthermore, platforms could intentionally implement more friction or speed bumps. Imagine, instead of infinite scroll, the app pauses after, say, 15 minutes and asks, do you want to continue scrolling? Or batching notifications so they arrive only at scheduled times, say twice a day, rather than interrupting you constantly. These are analogous to setting spending or time limits on a gambling machine, introducing natural stopping points.
Makes sense. Okay, and finally, how do we intervene effectively in that second pathway, the negative reinforcement route, the cycle of using platforms to avoid pain or numb out?
Here, the primary goal is different. It's about enhancing the individual's capacity for self-control and emotional regulation, and blocking that reflexive urge to use the platform as an emotional escape route. Individual therapeutic work often involves mindfulness training.
Mindfulness, how does that help?
Mindfulness helps individuals become more aware of their internal states, their thoughts, feelings, urges, without immediately reacting to them. It builds the ability to tolerate discomfort, to sit with difficult emotions like anxiety or boredom, rather than automatically reaching for the phone to escape them. It strengthens that prefrontal cortex control.
Building emotional resilience.
Exactly. But again, individual strategies alone might not be enough given the scale and design of the problem. At the systemic level, there's a growing call for regulatory frameworks. We need to start thinking about digital product safety standards, similar to how we regulate food or toys or cars.
Treating damaging algorithms like a public health issue.
Precisely. Acknowledging that the digital environment itself, as currently designed by many platforms optimizing purely for engagement, can be psychologically damaging, requires external checks and balances. Regulation could help mitigate the pervasive negative consequences these platforms can have when they're engineered primarily to exploit human vulnerabilities for profit, rather than prioritizing user well-being. #outro.
Wow. Okay, so this whole deep dive, it feels like it's fundamentally shifted the framing of that initial story, my conversation with my mom. We've pretty clearly established that this intentional unplugging my choice to, read a useless magazine or literally make a milkshake, instead of being instantly responsive, it isn't some sign of poor discipline or laziness or just being busy.
Not at all.
It's actually, when you look at all this, a completely rational, maybe even necessary response to an environment that we now understand is meticulously constructed to exploit both our ancient neurobiology, those dopamine pathways, and our outdated evolutionary social wiring.
That's the core takeaway, I think. The individual struggle that so many people feel the guilt about not responding, the difficulty disconnecting, it's really a reflection, a symptom of a much larger systemic design problem.
Yeah.
We're all grappling individually with the technologies that are purposefully designed to continually blur the line between human connection and machine interaction, between genuine choice and engineered compulsion. And these platforms are incredibly ruthlessly effective at driving that compulsive behavior, precisely because they leverage the most powerful, most addiction-inducing reinforcement schedule, known to psychology, that variable ratio reinforcement. It's designed to perpetually keep the user locked in that digital machine zone, always seeking the next hit.
So when you choose consciously to put the phone down, maybe even throw it across the room like I do sometimes, and dedicate your attention to some useless, mundane, real-world activity, making that milkshake, that's not laziness. It's actually a profound act of cognitive self-defense. It's pushback.
It absolutely is. The fight isn't really about having superhuman willpower to ignore one more notification. It's about something much deeper. Reclaiming your brain's fundamental capacity for focused attention, for deep thought, for genuine satisfaction from technologies that have been specifically engineered to capture and monetize that capacity, your most precious and finite resource.
So the ultimate goal of intentionally unplugging, of choosing the milkshake over the notification, it isn't just about discipline. It's maybe about reclaiming a kind of evolutionary sovereignty, taking back control of our own attention and our own experience.
Beautifully put. Reclaiming evolutionary sovereignty in the face of the machine. That's exactly what's at stake.